Hello good people of YouTube, and welcome to my hobby channel, and in this video I will be unboxing and building some of the Barons War mounted sergeants from 1150 to 1320. "12 cavalry bases, which I won't be using. 4 sprues of horses, 3 horses on each. And it's interesting to see that these are actually the light horse sprues that I have reviewed in previous videos. Those of you who may be interested, you can also buy the light horses as part of the general accoutrements range from Wargames Atlantic. And in these boxes for £25 you get 18 multi-part hard plastic horses. All the heads, I believe, are interchangeable. The tails are interchangeable, and if I remember rightly, so are the left and the right sides of the horses' bodies. So you can make endless combinations. As it says here, many unique poses can be built. So the horses in this box are light horses, which is great. And then we've got 4 sprues of mounted sergeants. So we'll start with the light horse sprue, and I'll just show you very quickly the lovely detail that you get on the horse heads. And the heads themselves are incomplete. These 4 numbered objects here are actually the reins, and they correspond to the various heads. So A1 up in the corner here requires A2, which is here. C1 there requires C2, which is here, and so on. So you build the heads by gluing the bottom part of the mouth there in place, and this funny cup-shaped object here is actually the underside of the neck there. So you assemble the heads, and you can then stick the heads to any combination of the horse halves. And then there are also 4 tails. So each sprue contains 3 horse bodies, 4 heads and 4 tails. So there's plenty of variation. And here we have the sprue containing the mounted sergeants. And we'll start with the bodies, which we've got there, 3 of those. And the design is similar to the design of the mounted knights, although the clothing and armour is different. But they have this weird gap between their legs there, which accommodates the saddle, and that's these 3 objects at the top here. We've got 6 shields, small design and a slightly larger design, a variation of bladed weapons, sword hands. There's a club there, and then we've got some lance or spear arms here, and the shield arms do correspond with the weapon arms in terms of the fabric design, whether or not they've got chain mail on the upper part of the arm. So a little bit of attention to detail is required, I guess, when building the mounted sergeants. And there's actually some war hammers there, spiked hammers, used for piercing armor and helmets. Nice variety of weapons. And then we'll have a quick look at the heads. There's 2 heads at this end of the sprue near the saddles. A bunch of really lovely characterful heads along here. Some have the helmets that are more typically associated with Normans, and then others have like the kettle helm, I think it's called. Lots of character, like I said. Some of these faces do look very similar to the foot sergeants. They've probably been reused. And there's one there, which I think is the head that I used on the foot sergeant. So the nice thing about that is that you could potentially do a foot version and a mounted version of the same miniature. So if I pick something like this body here that he's pointing to, I could do a mounted version, and rather than him carrying the helmet under his arm, although he could do, maybe the helmet is hanging from his horse. But yeah, that's quite fun. But just very quickly, the other thing I have noticed is there are no crossbows in this, which is a shame, because again, just from a model building point of view, that if you could have made a mounted version of a foot sergeant with a crossbow, that would have been pretty cool as well. So now I'm going to snip all the horse parts from a sprue and just explore some of the variations that can be built from these. So the next thing I need to do is clean up the detachment scars, like so, and also if I notice any mold lines, I'll clean them off whilst I'm removing detachment scars. I tend not to worry too much about mold lines when I'm making my videos, because the focus is on gluing the models together and showing the variety. But when I get round to painting these, I will show you how I double check before I paint a miniature that I've got all the offending detachment scars and mold lines cleared up. For example, there's a mold line here, not a very prominent one, but you can see that this is where the two halves of the mold meet, and it's just running around that part of the rump. Having spotted one, I'll just gently rub with a soft emery board, the kind of thing that you can get for filing your nails, like so, and that will smooth the surface. But you can also see how it leaves an unsightly finish there, so that when I'm shooting a video, that doesn't look very good, which is why I tend to leave them alone until I'm ready to prime. And although I did cover this in the previous video where I looked at the mounted knights from Wargames Atlantic, I'll just quickly assemble another one of these horse heads again, just to show you in principle how it works. So you've got the reins as a separate piece with the bottom part of the mouth there, and they attach to the underside of the neck as well, which then just gives that the rounded end that fits into the shoulder socket on the horses. So I will just quickly glue that. So I'll get some plastic glue on there and a tiny spot of plastic glue at the back of the mouth, and take the reins and just gently slot them into place. Simple as. So I can do that 4 times to make the 4 heads that I've got, and then we'll look at some of the body variations. I've glued all the heads and I've got the horse halves ready, and I just want to run through some combinations very quickly to show you the kind of thing that you can achieve with the different halves, and hopefully you'll be able to see how the different heads can give quite a different feel to the horse. Some convey motion, others are more sedentary, or perhaps even thoughtful, if a horse can indeed be thoughtful. But occasionally you kind of come across a classic pose. I mean, that's quite a nice one. Suggests a bit of speed. but it's more to do with the angle of the head, and that's quite a good one as well. And then the final horse half there, which works really well with a head like that. Or like this one, where it's quite sort of upright, maybe the horse is chomping at the bit. Although that's a nice pose, it's less successful because, of course, the body of the horse isn't moving as fast as the head would suggest. And then there's that one there, which is quite nice. Now this one is slightly different and quite interesting. Again, you get a sense of a bit more movement with these, and that's quite a determined, maybe moving from a canter to a gallop. I mean, I don't know much about horses, but this one will work quite well because that suggests some speed, and again the pose is echoing that. The front leg on this side, which would be the right leg of the horse, follows the line of the neck there. And these are all things that you think about when you're sculpting miniatures, but of course if you're gluing together plastic parts, you have that degree of control that a miniature sculptor would have. So that's a good pose. And if that had a tail streaming out at the back, there's lots of motion in that one. And then there's this one, which again carries the sense of a bit of movement, but not quite so intense as the previous one. Next half is that one, and this is a bit of a peculiar one because I don't know that a horse would actually ever adopt that pose whilst it was moving, but it does work quite nicely again with that extended head. To me, that creates a slight sense of uneasiness, which you might sometimes want, and that's quite a good one as well. And then the last one, combination there. Again, that's a nice believable pose there with that head. Similar pose here. That's the kind of pose that you would use on a horse where the mount was maybe a character or a commander. Again, we've got a little bit of movement there. And this one. And I hope this is the final one. A couple of the poses are very similar, so it does get a bit confusing. This is quite a reserved pose there. That kind of thing looks good. Sometimes when you just bring these horse heads together, you end up with a horse that reminds you perhaps of riot police on horseback, or you end up with another horse that makes you think of cavalry charging down a slope. So it doesn't do any harm to play around. The subtle differences, but they do all convey a mood of some description, a sense of urgency, or perhaps confidence and power or frustration, and you wouldn't think it was possible to do that perhaps with a horse, but if horse and rider are built to suggest the same sort of attitude, then you can come up with a model that really does look like a classic. So lots of variation there. Not every single combination works well, but hopefully that's given you some idea. Here are the 3 different horse poses that I've chosen to assemble, and I've put them together this way because I wanted to demonstrate how you can create static poses with not much movement, right the way through to horses that could be charging. And really the most significant element in defining these poses is the position of the horse's head. And then just to illustrate the point, what I wanted to do here was show you 2 very similar poses, but really the most distinguishing feature is the position of the tail and the head. And I could talk about this kind of thing for hours, but won't in this video. The sculptor in me is always looking to create poses that are believable and dynamic and tell a story. And I think the Wargames Atlantic light horses are models that really allow me to do that. So now the next thing I'm going to do is just build some riders that can sit on these horses and perhaps reinforce what I've just been talking about. I've chosen the parts that I want for each of the different horses to make the riders. So the first thing I want to do is stick the saddle in the appropriate place on this rider. And this method of construction is exactly the same on the mounted knights as well. So the saddle has a front and a back and just glues between the legs. The back of the saddle is slightly taller, only very slightly. So put some glue in there. Make sure the shorter end of the saddle is at the front. And push that in place. I've chosen a war hammer. And I want to make it look like he's ready to go into action, but he isn't actually fighting. Get the shield arm on there, raised slightly because sticking the shield on could be a little bit awkward, depending on where the neck of the horse is. Now I'm putting the head on. Tiny bit of blue tack on the saddle to try and hold this rider in place so that I can show you the pose that I've chosen for the rider on this horse. So there is some determination there, maybe even a little bit of apprehension. The shield will go on there, but I don't want to glue it on just yet. But I think that works really nicely, and that's an example of how you can combine the pose of the rider with the pose of the horse to create visual impact. So that's the first one. And here are the next selection of parts for the rider to go on this horse, which is a more static pose. So I want a figure that's going to look more imposing, more thoughtful maybe, and possibly a good figure for a commander or a general, or to go on the command stand. Again, I'll get the shield arm glued, and I already know where I want the head. I want to leave the arm till last of all, so I'm going to try and turn this head sideways a little. You can at least do that with these miniatures. There's no up or down movement unless you get into converting with putty, green stuff and so on. Trying not to upset the saddle there. On the face of it, that looks like quite a dynamic weapon arm there. You can have it lowered and pointing forward. But if I just put some blue tack on this saddle and try and get the rider in place. I'll put some glue on the arm now, and hopefully the placement of this arm will now demonstrate exactly what I was hoping to achieve. I'll have that just behind the foot rather than in front of it. That's quite nice. That's touching there, so as always I'll put a spot of glue in there, because that's another attachment point which will add to the strength of the assembly. But there, hopefully you can see that. We have a fairly static pose with a figure sitting in the saddle, spear or lance upright, and he's looking across the battlefield. Now this could be a standard bearer, or it could be the personal bodyguard or retinue of any commander or general that you might have. And if you do command bases, you can even do something like this, where you have your commander on foot and someone behind on horseback. So lots of scope with these mounted sergeants and the light horses that they come with. And the third horse that I built was the one that conveyed the greater sense of speed or motion, could have been charging. And I've chosen the bits that I want for the rider that will sit on that horse. This time when I put the shield arm on, I'm going to put it slightly higher than I have with the others. And the head, which I may remove at a later date, depending on how I build my armies, looks like a Norman cavalryman, and I do like that. But I'm just not sure that it would fit with any of the armies that I'm planning to build. And then, because the horse is charging, I'm going to use this spear or lance arm held forward like so. And now we'll see how that fits on the horse. Hopefully it won't clash, but you never know. So a little bit of blue tack on the saddle, bring the rider bring the rider down. Try and lean the rider forward now slightly, so instead of having it leaning back, move it forward a little. Okay, there. So in my previous video, the foot sergeants for Barons War, I built this chap, and I found the same head on the mounted sergeant sprue, but I also found the same face wearing the same hat. So I am now going to build a mounted version of this chap here using the final horse, and this is the fourth head that you get on the sprue. So I have the pieces that I need to make the mounted version of this commander on this horse here. And before I get started, you'll see that I've picked a body that's wearing the same style of clothing and chainmail and a sword that echoes the sword that I gave the foot sergeant. So very quickly, glue the saddle on again. Short bit at the front, tall bit at the back. Shield arm. Potentially I could have used another arm from the foot sergeant's box to carry that pose through, but I decided this time I'd have him wearing the helmet. And what I want to show you very quickly is how a couple of different positions with the sword arm will tell a different story. I know which position I want, so I'll start with the one that I'm not intending to use, unless the other one looks particularly naff. Most command models, when they're sculpted, would have something like this: sword in the air and the commander ready to shout orders. And I think that is a fantastic pose. I think that is really good. But the idea that I had in mind, and that I maybe want to think about, is actually lowering the sword arm. So you have a commander who is surveying the scene. And I think that looks really good. It's less imposing than a king or a baron or an earl or a knight might be. And if I just bring the other static horse, you can see how now these two models could be used on a command base, and between them they tell a story, which works very well, I think. Before I do a scale lineup, I just wanted to show the mounted sergeants at the head of this group of mounted knights. So the 4 mounted sergeants that I've just built are at the front here, and behind those we've got the mounted knights that I built in a previous video, so please check that out. Just very quickly run through some scale comparisons. So on the left we've got one of the mounted sergeants that I've just built from Wargames Atlantic. Then we've got a Victrix mounted knight, another mounted sergeant from Wargames Atlantic, and this is followed up by a painted Black Tree Designs medieval knight. I believe that's a metal figure. Again, behind that, Wargames Atlantic mounted sergeant, and then a Perry Miniatures mounted bowman from, I think, the Agincourt range. Behind that we've got another mounted sergeant from Wargames Atlantic, and then one from Fireforge Games. So coming back to the beginning again, I wanted to show you a mounted knight, this time I think from Conquest Designs. That's the model in the middle of the screen there. It is slightly smaller than most of the other plastic miniatures on the market. I think that works quite well if he is one of the retinue for a mounted knight. You don't want the mounted sergeants or the bodyguards of a knight to be on a larger, more imposing horse than the knight himself is on. And then in between these two mounted sergeants from Wargames Atlantic, I've just dropped in an unpainted and unbuilt metal mounted knight from Claymore Castings. Then for anyone who might be thinking about using these Barons War mounted sergeants as proxy troops in Warhammer the Old World, I'll do a quick lineup here that shows a mounted sergeant either side of a Bretonnian knight. And then here we've got one of the old Bretonnian squires or yeomen. Then another Wargames Atlantic mounted sergeant, either side of an Empire Pistolier or Road Warden. And finally, bringing up the rear, we've got the old plastic Empire Knights that you can still get with the Warhammer the Old World stuff today. As always, thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please smash that like button. Please press subscribe for more videos like this. And please feel free to leave a comment if you'd like to, but please keep those comments kind and respectful. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.